G'day, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you so much for joining us once again for another episode of the Big Bad Brad Show MMA edition. My name is Brad Williams, and this is the show that aims to provide you with a fan's eye view of mixed martial arts from way up the back in the cheap seats. You can find us at facebook.com/BigBadBradMMA. You can find us on Twitter at BigBadBradMMA, and you can also find us on YouTube. Just search Big Bad Brad Show MMA, and you'll be able to find us. No dramas at all. I am back. I've had a few weeks off. I'm not going to lie to you. I feel like I can be honest with you guys. I was in a bit of a depression spiral. I was really hoping to be in Vegas this weekend to watch UFC 200 and all the festivities of International Fight Week. Sadly, I didn't have a lazy 5 or 6 grand laying around. But, you know, we gave it a red-hot go. And for a while, I thought, I'm just going to brush the podcast because if I can't be at UFC 200 to give you guys the scoop on all things International Fight Week from Vegas itself, then what was the point? But I thought, you know what? The internet's full of opinions no one cares about, and people aren't justified to provide. If everybody on Facebook can become a political expert out of nowhere just because we're having an election, why the bloody hell can't I provide a preview of the biggest week on the UFC calendar each and every single year? And this year, International Fight Week is just a little bit bigger because, as we've discussed a million times on the podcast, and it's finally here, UFC 200 is just 3 sleeps away as of the recording of the podcast, and I cannot wait. But of course, if we've learned anything as fight fans, it's to not count your chickens before they hatch. And everything, ever since the Conor McGregor fiasco, and all of the goings-on with Conor being yanked from the card and then Nate deciding he didn't want to fight anyone but Conor, we got the new main event, a great main event, the UFC Light Heavyweight Championship unification fight between John Bones Jones and the UFC Light Heavyweight Champion Daniel Cormier. And everything was going great, guns. We got to almost the weekend of the fight. And then all of a sudden, this afternoon Australian time, the news broke that no one could have possibly predicted. For those that don't know, if you haven't heard it yet, John Jones has been pulled from the UFC 200 main event 3 days out from the card after a potential anti-doping violation as picked up by the United States Anti-Doping Agency. Obviously, we don't know too much about it yet because the news only broke a couple of hours ago, but fair dinkum. How many chances does this bloke want? He's had more chances than a game of Monopoly. The UFC keeps coming to his rescue. They keep coming back with those feel-good stories of redemption and the bad boy that's turned his life around. And then on the eve of the biggest card of the year, arguably the biggest card the UFC has ever put on, he pops for a potential anti-doping violation. The person you got to feel most for in this situation is Daniel Cormier. He said in the lead-up to this fight, if he couldn't beat John Jones, then it would forever be a mark on his legacy. He was looking prepared for the fight. He was looking to be in great shape. It had almost taken a back seat to the Brock Lesnar-Mark Hunt fight, and I think that was a good thing. It gave both guys could kind of take their foot off the pedal as far as the promotional, smack talking and all that sort of stuff and just concentrate on the fight. And if there was anything that we saw after John Jones' fight with Ovince St. Preux, it's that he probably needed to focus on this fight because it's a fair point to make that if the John Jones that showed up against OSP showed up against Daniel Cormier, then it's very, very likely that DC would have been walking out of UFC 200 as the undisputed UFC heavyweight champion of the world. But of course, now we're not going to get to see that fight. It's all over Red Rover. Daniel Cormier won't be facing a replacement opponent. He has been taken from the card altogether. So we'll keep you updated with any breaking news that may come to hand with regard to this situation. But just to reiterate, UFC 200, John Jones has been taken off the card, and the new main event is the fight that felt more and more like the main event as we went on anyway, and that is the blockbuster heavyweight clash between Brock Lesnar and the Super Samoan Mark Hunt. But before we get to that, we have got stacks to get through on this episode with 3 fight cards in 3 days just around the corner. I'm going to keep it brief because we all want to get home to our families. I'm just going to rip through my key fights for each card. The first one we're going to discuss is UFC Fight Night 90. It's headlined by a UFC lightweight title fight, the champion Rafael Dos Anjos defending his title against former Bellator lightweight champion Eddie Alvarez. There's stacks of interesting fights on the card. Lots of fighters that probably don't have the name value of a card like UFC 200, but still some great fighters on the card. Anthony Burchak on the undercard, Mike Pyle, the evergreen, taking on Alberto Mina. The main card, Irish Joe Duffy looking to bounce back from that loss to Dustin Poirier against Mitch Clark. Alan Jouban, the male model from Mudgee, taking on Belal Muhammad. The co-main event sees a gigantic heavyweight clash between the Black Beast Derek Lewis and Big Country Roy Nelson. I think this fight is absolutely got fireworks written all over it. Derek Lewis coming off that demolition of Gabriel Gonzaga. Roy Big Country Nelson, as advertised, he's a big dude with big power, and you don't want to blink during this fight. It could be something special. Probably not from a technical standpoint, but as far as two massive dudes having a go, we could be in for a treat. I'm going with Big Country in this fight. I think he's obviously a much more experienced fighter. I think he's a little bit more well-rounded than Derek Lewis. Derek Lewis is just a big, powerful dude, whereas Big Country, he's got that massive knockout power, particularly in that overhand right, but he's also a legitimate black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I think Big Country gets it done here. But, I could be wrong. I'm wrong. Actually, you know what I was thinking today? If you're bored and you got the podcast on and you're watching the fights tomorrow, of course, for fight night, and then Saturday, the Tough 23 finale, and Sunday, UFC 200, scull your beer every time I get a fight pick wrong. It could be fun for the whole family. Obviously, the family members over 18. And then the main event, Rafael dos Anjos, in the best form of his career by far, defending his lightweight title against Eddie Alvarez. Eddie Alvarez has been on a tear lately, copped a little bit of flack because his fights of late haven't really been the most fan-friendly. Of course, everyone remembers his wars with Michael Chandler in Bellator, but you can't blame the guy. He's in the UFC. He's got the biggest opportunity of his life. He's going to do what he has to do to win the fights. If it's not that pretty to watch, I don't think he really cares that much. To be a UFC world champion is what everybody in the sport, if they're not gunning for, is what they should be gunning for. So, full credit Eddie Alvarez. He's got himself into a main event for the strap, and he's going to do what he's got to do to win. Dos Anjos has looked unreal. Of course, there was a little bit of the luster that fell away when his fight with Conor McGregor fell through, but I think this is a great fight, and we could be in for a real technical sort of a chess match, and I, for one, cannot wait. I think it's going to be fantastic. Of course, the prelim card kicks off at 8:30 a.m. tomorrow morning, as of the recording of the podcast, Friday, July 8th, on UFC Fight Pass. The main card will also stream on Fight Pass, but we are very lucky in Australia. It's also going to be shown on Fox Sports 3 at 12 p.m. Friday, the 8th of July. That's UFC Fight Night 90. Check it out. We're going to keep on rolling because, as I say, we've got so much to get through this week. And next, we're going to take a look at the Ultimate Fighter 23 finale. Of course, the main event sees UFC strawweight champion of the world, Joanna Jędrzejczyk, the undefeated Polish powerhouse, taken on Claudia Gadelha. She's 13-1 overall. Her only loss is to the champion, Joanna Jędrzejczyk. So we are going to get to that in just a moment. But this card also too sensational, and a couple of very good reasons for us Aussie fans to get up early and check out the Fight Pass prelims. The very first fight on the card sees Brisbane schoolteacher / MMA fighter Anton Zafir taking on Li Jinglang. Of course, Anton Zafir made his UFC debut on short notice against James Muntasri at UFC 193 in Melbourne. Came up short on that occasion, but he has got another opportunity, which is sensational news for Anton, and we wish him nothing but the best. I'd love to see him get in there and rip and tear. I think that's definitely worth getting up early to watch on Saturday morning. And of course, the featured prelim on UFC Fight Pass, Jake Matthews, one of the most exciting prospects ever to come out of Australia, taking on the Motown phenom Kevin Lee. Kevin Lee coming off a unanimous decision victory over former Ultimate Fighter winner Efren Escudero. Jake Matthews coming off that sensational submission victory up in Brizzy. Against, I'm drawing a blank here again, Johnny Case, excuse me. Great spotlight for Jake Matthews and also Anton Zafir to be a part of UFC International Fight Week. And we wish the boys nothing but the best. Definitely worth getting up early to watch. We move to the prelim card. Cesar Mutanch Ferreira going to be taking on Anthony Smith. John Moraga, former UFC flyweight title challenger. The prelim card will also see the featherweight debut of Gray Maynard, former UFC lightweight title challenger, against Fernando Bruno. Spoilers here if you aren't up to date with the Ultimate Fighter 23 because it doesn't air until tonight on Foxtel. Turn down your podcast for 10 seconds. Corey Hendricks, who was the favourite to take out the Ultimate Fighter 23 and had to withdraw with an injury, has secured a place on the card. He'll also be taking on Tough 23 competitor Josh Stansbury. So that could be a great fight. I loved Corey Hendricks. I thought he was the lock to win the whole thing. So it's good to see him get an opportunity. We move now to the main card. And, of course, as I said a moment ago, spoilers, of course, if you aren't up to date with the Ultimate Fighter 23, just turn it down a little bit. Give yourself 20 seconds maybe this time. The women's strawweight tournament final is going to see Amanda Cooper taking on Tatiana Suarez, and the men's light heavyweight tournament final sees Khalil Roundtree taking full advantage of his second chance to take on Andrew Sanchez. Both great fights. I've really enjoyed this season. I know the Ultimate Fighter, people are starting to get a little bit sick of it perhaps. Ratings aren't what they used to be, but I think it's still a great a great platform for up-and-coming fighters to get their start on a huge stage and get all the right people looking at them. And some of these fighters on this season particularly have taken full advantage of this opportunity. I think it's been a really fun season to watch. Also, the main card, in a very, very intriguing contest, sees Ross Pearson, the stalwart of the UFC, and of course Ultimate Fighter Season 8 winner, taken on former Bellator lightweight champion Will Brooks. Will Brooks, if you haven't seen him fight, is just world class. I think his arrival in the UFC has been a long time coming, and he's got a stern challenge in Ross Pearson. Tough as nails, been there, done it, bought the t-shirt. There's nothing Ross Pearson hasn't seen inside the octagon. So I think that could be really a genuine chance of being your fight of the night. So keep an eye out for Will Brooks and Ross Pearson. And of course, the main event of the evening, Joanna Jędrzejczyk, the undefeated UFC strawweight champion, taking on Claudia Gadelha. Of course, the girls have been opposite coaches on The Ultimate Fighter Season 23, and one of the biggest things to come out of the show is Joanna Jędrzejczyk. She's a bloody cocky little thing, isn't she? God, she's confrontational. She's picking at Claudia Gadelha, almost like a big sister picking on a little sister, if those two sisters then got in and punched shit out of each other in a cage. I think Claudia Gadelha, I love her cool confidence heading into this fight. The first fight between the two, for people that don't know, they have fought before, was very, very close. And Joanna came out on top, and since then has just looked unstoppable. She's been smashing people to pieces. But Claudia Gadelha, as I say, she's confident. She truly believes that she won the first fight, and she thinks she's going to win the rematch. Joanna Jędrzejczyk oozing confidence. If this fight is anything like the first one, we are in for a treat. I think it's going to be sensational. Look, if you had a gun to my head, I would probably say Joanna, just because she's been unreal since securing that strap. But, I wouldn't be surprised to see Claudia take it out, I think. And I would love to see it too. I think she seems like a cool chick. She's a very, very talented fighter. And, don't blink during that fight, because with the animosity that's built up between these two and the ability that they have in the cage, it has got barn burner written all over it. So the Ultimate Fighter 23 finale. The prelims kick off on UFC Fight Pass at 9 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. The prelim card on Fox Sports 2 kicks off at 10 a.m. and, of course, the main card at 12 midday Australian Eastern Standard Time on Fox Sports 2. We're going to keep on chugging along, and it's time now to get to the main course of the meal that is UFC International Fight Week, and that, of course, is UFC 200. It seems like this has been so long in the making. I remember when they first announced Conor and Nate, and then that all fell through, and then we got our replacement main event in John Jones and DC, and now that's fallen through. But I think the main event that we have now has really felt well and truly like the main event since it was announced, and that is Mark Hunt, the Super Samoan, taking on the returning Brock Lesnar. 5 years away from the cage, he got the itch. Mark Hunt's keen to scratch it. And that is your new main event for UFC 200 as of this afternoon. We're going to get to that in just a few moments. But this card is ridiculous. There is seriously no other way to describe it. Wrap your head around this. Gang, come on this journey with me for a moment. The Fight Pass prelim card. The very first fight of the day is former Pride lightweight champion Takanori Gomi taking on UFC lightweight veteran Jim Miller. That is insane. If you're, tell you what, this is what irks me about being at the live fights. And it's different to Australia than it is in the States. Here, the Aussie crowds tend to be there from go. In the States, they tend to just kind of mull around and make their way in, usually for the main card. If you're not there, in your seat, with a beer, with your popcorn, with whatever you want, from the first bell of this opening fight, you are seriously kidding yourself. The Fight Pass prelims roll on with Gegard Mousasi taking on Thiago Marreta Santos, and the featured prelim on UFC Fight Pass, the bonus hunter Joe Lozon taking on the original Ultimate Fighter Diego Sanchez. This is almost certain to be your fight of the night if these boys fight to their potential. Joe Lozon has got a habit, or made a habit, I should say, out of securing fight of the night bonuses, knockout of the night bonuses, submission of the night bonuses. And Diego Sanchez, I don't think has ever been in a boring fight in his entire career. If there was ever a reason to get up early on a Sunday morning, this is definitely it. Joe Lozon, Diego Sanchez. Something. I'm just a little bit excited. We move now to the Fox Sports prelims. And it kicks off with UFC Wonder Kid Sage Northcutt looking to bounce back from his first career loss against Brian Barberino against Enrique Marin. We then move to a very, very important fight in the UFC Bantamweight division. A fight that could very easily secure or it could very well give us our next number one contender in the UFC bantamweight division. That's Rafael Assunção taking on former UFC bantamweight champion of the world TJ Dillashaw. We then move to former Ultimate Fighter winner Kelvin Gastelum taking on the former UFC welterweight champion of the world Johnny Hendricks, and then the featured prelim fight, Ultimate Fighter winner. It just seems like everyone's an Ultimate Fighter winner or a former champ. This card is insane. Juliana Pena taking on former UFC bantamweight title challenger Kat Zingano. This will be Kat's first fight back since that loss to Ronda Rousey around 18 months ago. How's she going to look when she gets there? Is it going to be any lingering mental scars over that devastating loss to Ronda? We're going to find out on Sunday. It could definitely put the winner straight into the conversation as far as being the next contender for the UFC Women's Bantamweight Championship. Of course, we don't know what Ronda's doing, whether she's coming back or not. Dana White said countless times that as soon as Ronda's back, she will challenge for the belt. But if she's not going to be back anytime soon and they're looking for someone towards the back end of the year, I think it's either going to be the winner of Juliana Pena and Kat Zingano, or it'll be the winner of Valentina Shevchenko and Holly Holm in just a couple of weeks' time. So stay tuned there. If I'm picking a winner in that fight, I'm probably going to go... I'm going to go Kat Zingano. But again, I wouldn't be surprised if Juliana Pena won. But if I had money on it, I'd probably go with Kat. We move to the main card now in a gigantic heavyweight clash between Travis Browne and former UFC heavyweight champion of the world, Cain Velasquez. This will be Cain's first fight since dropping the UFC heavyweight championship to former champion Fabricio Verdum. And a big challenge in Travis Browne. He's big, he's strong, he's lean, he's a fit heavyweight, so it's going to be a big challenge for Cain. I'm picking Cain Velasquez in this fight. I think he's the more well-rounded fighter. He's got sensational boxing, his wrestling's off the charts, he's got cardio for days. I'm going to go Cain Velasquez in this one. We now move to the interim featherweight championship fight. You might have forgotten. It's very easy to forget. Conor McGregor is actually the UFC featherweight champion of the world. Since he won it, there's really been no mention of him defending the belt. He went straight up to lightweight, and then that fell through, and then he fought Nate, and now he's fighting Nate again. And then they were talking about him fighting George St. Pierre. You could be forgiven for forgetting that Conor McGregor is the UFC featherweight champion, but in the meantime, they have created the interim featherweight championship. Dana White has said that the winner of this fight will fight Conor to unify the belts. Whether that actually happens or not, who knows? And we'll probably know more after Conor takes on Nate Diaz in August. But this is a very intriguing fight. I was in Vegas for the first fight between Frankie Edgar and Jose Aldo. Very close fight. I thought Aldo won. He picked up the decision, obviously. A lot of the crowd thought that Frankie won, but they were all drunk and we're in Vegas, so, take that for what it's worth. The big story here is going to be how Jose Aldo bounces back from that 13-second knockout loss to Conor McGregor. Frankie has been on an absolute roll. He's coming off that first round destruction of Chad Mendes. So this is a very, very intriguing fight. If Aldo comes out and looks like the Aldo of old, it sets up a very, very interesting rematch with Conor McGregor. But so far, Frankie's been looking like the man who cannot be denied. If I had to pick, bugger it, I'm going to go Frankie Edgar. Just because Frankie, I think, has well and truly earned an opportunity to fight for the undisputed title. This is just his last hurdle, but Aldo, man, he's world class. Just for shits and gigs, I'm going to go Frankie Edgar. The co-main event of UFC 200 sees UFC Women's Bantamweight Champion Miesha Tate taking on Amanda Nunes. Nunes is so strong. She's ultra aggressive. Fantastic striker. The only question mark has probably been on her gas tank and how long she can hang in there. Miesha Tate, as we know, is the Energizer Bunny. She will fight you all day if that's how long it takes. You've only got to look at her World Championship victory over Holly Holm in a fight that Holly Holm was winning, and then Miesha came back right at the death in the 5th round and pulled out that submission with a rear naked choke. Miesha Tate has got the heart of a lion. If I was... Oh, man, this could seriously go either way. Just because she's gunning for a rematch with Ronda, and we know how big her heart is, I'm going to go Miesha Tate. But again, I wouldn't be surprised to see Amanda Nunes pull off the upset. But gun to my head, Miesha Tate. We move now to the main event of the evening. I honestly can't remember the last time I was this excited for a fight, particularly a heavyweight fight. There are so many question marks in this main event, the new main event as of this afternoon, the Super Samoan Mark Hunt taking on the returning Brock Lesnar. Of course, Mark Hunt coming off that first round walk-off KO over Frank Mir in Brisbane in March. Brock Lesnar looking to make his return to the octagon after 5 years in the wilderness, or almost 5 years. He suffered that TKO loss to Alistair Overeem back in December of 2011, and he said that it's haunted him ever since, and he's looking to get back in there and see if he can still hang with the best, and make no doubt about it. Mark Hunt is one of the elite heavyweights in the world. He's got the biggest knockout punch in the UFC, bar none. His takedown defense is ridiculous, and he's just so casual leading into this fight. He's not sweating Brock Lesnar one bit. And to his credit, Brock Lesnar has been nothing but respectful of Mark Hunt as well. The guys had their first stare down this morning, their first face-off for the cameras, handshakes, nothing but respect. Just two guys getting in there to mix it up. I said it on a previous podcast, and I just want to reiterate again. I think to sleep on Brock Lesnar would be very naive. People tend to shit on Brock Lesnar because he's the WWE guy, but I said it long before he was ever in the WWE. He was the best collegiate wrestler in America. He was an NCAA Division I heavyweight champion. Brock Lesnar is a legitimate world-class grappler versus Mark Hunt, the former K1 kickboxing champion, ridiculous striker. You can't, for anyone that hasn't seen Mark Hunt and the ability that he has to shut people's lights out with one hand, you talk about fighters having knockout power. Mark Hunt will hit you so hard you forget what your name is. It's just incredible to watch. If he touches Brock Lesnar, that's it. It's all over Red Rover. But if Brock Lesnar can get his hands on Mark Hunt, as big and strong and powerful as he is, who knows? Are we going to see Mark Hunt shut him down in the first 30 seconds? Are we going to see Brock grind it out for 3 rounds? I'm always going to back the Super Samoan. I love Mark Hunt. I've seen every fight in Australia that he's been in. I'm a huge fan. So I'm tipping Mark Hunt. But again, and I sound like a broken record, but I would not be surprised one bit to see Brock Lesnar take out the main event of UFC 200. If you want to check it out, the Fight Pass prelims kick off 8:30 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time Sunday morning on Fight Pass, UFCFightPass.com. The prelims kick off at 10 a.m. on Fox Sports 1, and the main card kicks off at 12 p.m. midday on main event. Call and order it now. You're mad if you don't. I'm exhausted, and we've still got 30-something fights to get through. They all kick off tomorrow morning as of the recording of the podcast. So just to reiterate, Friday morning, the 8th of July, UFC Fight Night 90. Saturday morning, the 9th of July, the Ultimate Fighter 23 finale. And Sunday morning, the 10th of July, UFC 200. That brings us to the end of an absolutely mammoth podcast. Thanks so much for checking it out. You can find us at facebook.com/BigBadBradMMA. You can find us on Twitter at BigBadBradMMA. And you can find us on YouTube. Just search Big Bad Brad Show MMA. You'll be able to find us. No dramas at all. Thanks so much for checking it out. Enjoy a tremendous weekend of fights, and I will catch you next time.